Some players are having an absolute conniption over the fact that the Brotherhood of Steel are going to have an appearance in Fallout 76. I shared my thoughts on that topic in a recent video. I don't think finding the Brotherhood in West Virginia would be lore-breaking or a retcon. I think it would be unlikely. It needs some explanation, but it's perfectly possible for the Brotherhood to be here during the events of Fallout 76. After all, by this time, the Brotherhood had existed for over 25 years. But what is impossible is for the children of Adam to make an appearance in Fallout 76. And so far, we have little evidence that they do. We haven't fought any Children of Adam enemies, but as I showed off in a recent video when exploring the inventory of a Bethesda dev, we find a full suit of Zealot marine armor. This, you will already know, is the armor worn by the Children of Adam on Mount Desert Island from the Far Harbor DLC of Fallout 4. There's a problem with this. The problem is that the Children of Adam don't exist in any meaningful way until the construction of Megaton. In Fallout 3, Manya Vargas tells us that the entire reason Megaton exists as a town is because the Children of Adam wanted a place to revere the undetonated nuclear bomb in the center of the town.
Well, originally, it started as a hole in the ground. My pappy talked about how his father and the original settlers just hid in this crater. It was a collection of people trying to get into the vault, people worshipping the bomb, and a few other refugees. But the Church of Adam was just getting its start then. We needed their help to build the walls and clear the wreckage. If we'd have tried to move the bomb, they would have refused to help.
And so it was the Children of Adam, working with local scavvers and wastelanders, who constructed the town of Megaton. Now, we don't know exactly when Megaton was founded. According to Manya Vargas, the old woman of the town, it was her grandfather who was one of the original founders of the town. After the bombs dropped, they initially tried to gain access to Vault 101, but were denied. And so they moved a short distance away and worked with a new cult that had begun to form called the Children of Adam to build the town of Megaton. So Megaton's pretty old. And as a consequence, the Children of Adam have been around for a long time, but only around Megaton. There's no evidence that they went anywhere else before the events of Fallout 3. Then, during the events of Fallout 4, we find small groups of hostile Children of Adam all over the Commonwealth, and some neutral children, such as the ones at the impact site in the middle of the glowing sea. But it isn't until the Far Harbor DLC that we see the Children of Adam in any meaningful way. There, they have taken over and inhabited an abandoned pre-war naval facility which they now call the Nucleus. But it's here where we run into some more problems. We know that the Children of Adam have only been at the Nucleus for under 10 years. High Confessor Tectus and Confessor Martin were students of Confessor Cromwell, whom we met at Megaton during the events of Fallout 3. It was shortly after those events that Tectus and Martin, with a small band of other children, migrated from the capital wasteland to Mount Desert Island. So they couldn't have been here any longer than 10 years. Once they got here, they discovered the USS Democracy, a pre-war nuclear submarine, which they now call the Vessel, and a bunch of pre-war marine armor. Now, the marine armor itself is, of course, pre-war, so we should be able to find some marine armor during the events of Fallout 76. That's not the thing I've got a problem with. The thing I have a problem with is that this armor in 76 is called Zealot marine armor. Zealot is specifically a Children of Adam title. We find Zealot as a prefix to the names of many of the devoted. In Far Harbor, there are 3 suits of marine armor. There's the Marine Assault version, which is the version US Marines used. This is the best version in the game, and incidentally, this is the version we find in a sunken shipment that the military was shipping to the Nucleus before the bombs dropped. Then, there's the slightly less powerful Zealot's Marine armor. It's less powerful because it was sitting around the Nucleus for 200 years. The Children of Adam found it 10 years ago, and they've been wearing it, repairing it, and tinkering with it for 10 years. So the Zealot and Inquisitor have 10 years worth of wear on them. This armor has been scribbled on by the children of Adam living in the nucleus. And then there is one other set, the Inquisitor Marine armor. It is also inferior to the Assault Marine armor, but it's just a little bit better than the Zealot Marine armor. But it looks exactly like the Zealot's Marine armor. It has children of Adam insignia scrawled all over it. Since we know that the children of Adam started in Megaton on the west coast, and since it's likely it is there they remained until Confessor Cromwell trained Tectus and Martin and sent them to Mount Desert Island, and since we know that the children of Adam never even arrived at the nucleus until at least 2277 or 78, we can therefore know that they would have never gotten their hands on pre-war assault marine armor, upon which they could have inscribed their children of Adam insignia, turning it into Zealot armor, until 2277 or 78. Even if we assume that the original founders of the Children of Adam sent missionaries or proselytizers to the east immediately after founding their cult and the town of Megaton,
In my youth, I traveled quite a bit, but that was a different life.
thereby explaining their existence in West Virginia, that still doesn't explain why they had marine armor, unless that faction as well found a pre-war naval site and raided it of marine armor and coincidentally used the exact same insignia that Tectus and Martin developed for their faction 200 years in the future on Mount Desert Island. Which means finding Zealot inscribed marine armor in Fallout 76 is impossible. Impossible! And yet here it is, right in our faces. How do we explain this? Well, there are two redeeming factors here that we can consider. The first is that we get a preview of what this Zealot marine armor looks like, and it just looks like marine armor. It doesn't have any Children of Adam insignia. Instead, this Zealot's prefix appears to be some form of legendary effect. Notice that each piece in this set has a legendary star next to it, and we can see what the legendary effect is. Minus 15% damage from Scorched. The Zealot's marine armor from Far Harbor is very different. It doesn't have this legendary effect. So it could be that Zealot is simply the name of a new legendary effect in Fallout 76, and it just so happens that in this instance, the legendary effect was applied to a full suit of marine armor, which, as we know, is canonical. It existed before the war, therefore it can exist in Fallout 76, giving us the illusion that this suit of marine armor came from the Children of Adam. But it's possible that it didn't, and it's just the name of a legendary effect. The second saving grace here is the word playtest, right next to Zealots in the armor name. And we have to remember that this is the beta. The game hasn't released yet. They're doing all sorts of tests. I came upon this armor in the inventory of a Bethesda dev, a dev who likely didn't earn any of these items in his or her inventory, but likely spawned it to test things while working on the game. It's possible that we won't even find any Zealot's marine armor in the game. Perhaps if Zealot is a legendary effect, it only works with other types of armor, and this was just a test. And so I keep having to remind myself that what we see during the beta, it's not set in stone. We don't really know if that's going to appear in the finished published version of the game, which we won't have access to until November 14th. Even if we do a stress test, or even when we get our hands on the beta, we're not playing the finished published game. Anything can change, and we really can't take everything at face value. So to sum up, if this suit of armor really is from the Children of Adam from Far Harbor, then that is lore-breaking. There's no possible way that should ever happen. But there are still other ways we can explain this that are not lore-breaking, so we don't really know for sure. Now, there are a few other interesting things I discovered while scrubbing through my footage from the Greenbrier event. I want to point out how they changed our inventory information architecture. Look at the top here. This is how the inventory is laid out in our barter dialogue. We've got weapons, apparel, aid, and miscellaneous, but then miscellaneous is further broken up into holotapes and notes. That's a great touch. I can't tell you how long I've spent sifting through my miscellaneous section filled with hundreds of ridiculous keys and key cards, looking for a holotape that I need for a quest or a note that I need for a quest. Having it split out like that is fantastic, and it tells us that they're putting significant emphasis on quests. Why else would we need an entire tab of our inventory dedicated to holotapes and notes unless we will be finding lots of holotapes and notes likely involved with quests? Another thing to notice is that there's a damaged holotape in this Bethesda dev's inventory. In my last video like this, I speculated that the blank holotapes directly above it perhaps can be used by the player to create his own holotape messages, whether recorded audio or text. But after noticing this damaged holotape, instead, I think it's much more likely that this is going to be used to copy and create recipes. Similar to how in the Old World Blues DLC for Fallout New Vegas, we are able to take burnt, ruined, and scorched books, turn them into blank books, and then turn those blank books into magazines and recipes and stuff like that. My bet is that a damaged holotape can be scrapped and turned into a blank holotape, and that a blank holotape can be turned into a recipe or a blueprint or a schematic that we can then sell to other players. That's just speculation, but if true, I think that's really cool. Another thing I noticed is a new aid hardware item called the Phantom Device. We don't know what this looks like, but based on its name, I think it probably looks a lot like a stealth boy. Or functions like one. I'm betting it's some sort of pre-war handheld battlefield device. But what does it do? Well, we learn exactly what it does. We find its description in the center of the screen. It frenzies nearby creatures and renders you almost completely invisible. I'm excited to learn that we're going to get a bunch of new aid items to experiment with, like this new Phantom device. Now I just want to know what it looks like. There's a lot to learn by scrubbing through this guy's inventory. As I mentioned in my last video, there are super and diluted versions of many of the chems we're familiar with. The diluted version of Rad-X, for example, only gives us 50 rad resist for 10 minutes instead of 100 from a regular Rad-X. The diluted version of Radaway only removes 150 rads instead of the 300 rads of a regular Radaway. And here's how the stim packs work. A regular stim pack will quickly heal 40% of our health, and then slowly heal a further 20% of our health. The diluted stim pack does half that. It quickly heals only 20% of our health, and then slowly heals another 10%. Taking a look at the data tab of our Pip-Boy, we find some new stuff. We see that quests are split into 4 different sub-tabs. Main, where we can keep track of the main quest, but then also side, daily, and event. So we knew that there were going to be local events. These get added to our event tab automatically. When we enter a location, we have the option to participate in a local event, and we can track the status of that event here in the event tab underneath data. But it looks like we'll also get daily quests that we can repeat each day. I'm assuming they're much like Radiant quests from Fallout 4, but then also side quests. The existence of this tab gives me hope that we will find many more quests in the game besides the primary quest. In Fallout 4, all of the quests were dumped into one tab. We could track as many of them as we wanted to, but side quests would get stacked on top of the main quests. It could get confusing. The fact that they're separating them out here is great. They're investing in information architecture to make our lives easier. And if they're dedicating an entire tab of the UI to side quests, well, that can only mean that we will find lots of side quests in the game. That's a huge relief to me. One thing to bear in mind, this is something that we talked about during my most recent live show. Fallout 76 is a persistent world, so the clock is ticking even when we're not in the world playing. This means that someday, the in-game time of Fallout 76 will meet the dates of the events of Fallout 3, New Vegas, and 4. It's possible that someday we will be playing in West Virginia at the same time that we're playing the Lone Wanderer, the Courier, or the Sole Survivor elsewhere on the continent, which makes it even more surprising that no one in the Capital Wasteland had heard from anyone living in West Virginia during the events of Fallout 3. I wonder why that is. I wonder if that will be explained in the lore of Fallout 76. Perhaps the wilds of West Virginia are just so wild and dangerous that people can get in, but few people ever find their way out. That would explain why no news of West Virginia has come to the Commonwealth or the Capital Wasteland, but it doesn't explain why rumor hasn't spread about the place. After all, the Divide on the West Coast had garnered almost a mythological reputation for itself, despite few people having seen it and survived to tell the tale. Here's an example taking a look at our Pip-Boy. You see that the game is not paused, and the time in the lower right-hand corner continues to tick. The time scales of Fallout 3 New Vegas are 30 to 1, so 30 minutes pass in the Fallout universe for every 1 real-world minute. But in Fallout 4 that changed, and the time scale became 20 to 1. 20 minutes pass in Fallout 4 for every 1 minute in our own universe. So which one do we go by? Well, Fallout 76 is more similar to 4 than the other games, so assuming they used the Fallout 4 timescale of 20 to 1, then we can do some math to figure out exactly when, by our time, the events of one of the other Fallout games will happen during the time span of Fallout 76. Let's do Fallout 3 as an example. The events of Fallout 3 take place on August 17th, 2277. The events of Fallout 76 take place on October 23rd, 2102. The difference in days between those two dates, according to an epoch calculator I used online, is exactly 63,851 days. If we then divide that by 20 to get the 20 to 1 timescale of the Fallout universe, those roughly 175 years will pass in our world in only 8.74 years. Which means that if the Fallout 76 clock starts ticking on November 14th, the day the game releases, then the events of Fallout 3 will happen in the Fallout 76 universe on Wednesday, August 11th, 2027 in the real world. I struggled with that date thanks to everyone on Discord who helped me crunch the numbers to get that date. You can find a public link to my Discord channel in the description below. And one little quirk I noticed is it looks like the time in the Pip-Boy UI is a little faster than the hardware display. It goes by really fast. I slowed it down so you can see it. Here the minute flips on the Pip-Boy, and then it takes a while for it to flip on the hardware. But in real time, it goes by much more faster. There's about a second delay between the UI time and the hardware time. Here it is in real time. And there you have it. Those are more things I noticed from reviewing my footage from the Greenbrier event. What are your thoughts on discovering the Zealot marine armor? Which do you think is a more likely explanation? That this is a lore-breaking suit of armor directly referencing High Confessor Tectus's chapter of the children of Adam inhabiting the nucleus on Mount Desert Island? Or that it's not lore-breaking and it's simply a coincidence, a mixture of legendary effects and pre-war assault marine armor? Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. I publish many videos each and every week here on my channel, so if you want to make sure you don't miss my next episode, be sure to subscribe and to click that bell notification button. I have a shirt shop with completely unique designs that you can't find anywhere else. My shirts come in a variety of men's, women's, and children's sizes, and in a wide array of colors. You can find my designs on other products as well, like smartphone cases, pillows, posters, mugs, prints, etc. So if interested, you can find a link to my shop in the description below, or you can click here. If you like what I do and you want to support me in a more personal way, consider becoming one of my patrons on Patreon or a member here on YouTube. But more than anything, I'm just so glad you're here watching this video with me today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you soon with a brand new episode.